Hey everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here. I'm here with two of my esteemed colleagues. I'm excited about what we're going to talk about. I've got Dr. Andrew Wells and Dr. Chad Woolner. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Doing awesome. Great to be here.
Stereo, I love it. I know we're going to raise the roof. Let me just dig in. We're going to talk about functional medicine. Why has functional medicine in many instances become too allopathic?
Yeah, I think we're going to rub some doctors the wrong way here, and on purpose. And I think what we're going to say may be a little bit controversial in the functional medicine world, and that's okay. I think, and thank you first of all for having us on this platform, because I think as functional medicine practitioners, as healthcare providers, we need to have these discussions, because sometimes our profession takes us down a path that we don't necessarily want to go down, and end up in a place where we never thought we'd be. And the reason we wanted to collectively talk about this topic is when you think of functional medicine, and I get this question a lot when people ask me, "Hey, what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I teach doctors how to do functional medicine." And like, "Well, what is functional medicine?" And it's a good question. And sometimes I honestly, sometimes I struggle to answer what functional medicine actually is. And I'll say things like, well, we help people overcome chronic health issues without drugs and surgery. We help people reverse disease naturally. We're holistic providers, things like that. And that's kind of how I explain functional medicine. But when you look at functional medicine as a whole, I see a huge problem. And the problem is, if you look at a lot of the way most providers approach functional medicine, it looks exactly like traditional medicine, meaning patient comes in with a problem. The patient will maybe go through some testing, lab testing, some diagnostics to figure out objectively what's driving the pathways that's causing these issues. But here's where it goes south, in my opinion, is that the solution is a pill. And a lot of practitioners would argue, well, functional medicine is way better because it's natural. We have natural solutions to the problem. It's not a drug. It's not a pharmaceutical drug. It's an herb. It's a supplement. It's a concoction of things that are all natural. And the problem with that is it's very much outside in thinking. And it's not, people don't have these, most people don't have these conditions because they're lacking of a certain chemical. A lot of people, especially in the US, have a lot of the chronic health issues they do because of the environment that they're in, the environment they put themselves in, for lots of different factors there that we can unpack. But I think sometimes a lot of practitioners stop short in what they can do to help patients get better by just ending it as supplements. So it's this test, supplement, test, supplement, test, supplement, test, supplement cycle that we get in, which is exactly like your internist or your primary care doc who is doing the same thing: test, drug, test, drug, test, drug. And to me, I think as functional medicine practitioners, we're really, really coming up short for our patients. And I think sadly, in some cases, that's where functional medicine has been. I think it's heading out of that cycle that we've gotten ourselves into. But yeah, I think that's what we mean when we say it looks allopathic.
I would add too that one of the terms that we coined or use is this concept of what we call multi-level symptom management, where you know what happens is many of the functional medicine practitioners will kind of point the finger at many of the kind of more allopathic conventional providers, in that, let's just say a thyroid patient comes in, patient complaining of thyroid problems. Well, the conventional provider is going to run some basic lab tests, right? And then they may refer out to an endocrinologist who might do even more lab testing. And let's say that they come back with their thyroid panels and things are off, whatever that looks like, but things are off. The functional medicine provider steps in and says, "You dummies, it's really in the gut," right? And so then they do some more lab testing, right? They do more advanced GI testing, stool testing, whatever that is, maybe some genetic testing. And they find at a deeper level, what they're claiming is the root cause. But in reality, what we're saying is, no, these are still just symptoms that you're looking at. If it is leaky gut that's driving the Hashimoto's, let's say, most functional medicine providers agree that is a driver. We would argue that still is not the root cause. We still have to ask what's driving the leaky gut. And at the end of the day, it requires a certain level of willingness to kind of keep digging until you really can't dig any further. And typically what we find is at the end of that road, usually one way or another, exactly what Andrew was saying, it's some type of an environmental factor or situation that we have to start addressing. And the problem, I think, there is that what it starts to look like then is far more foreign to what they're used to, because at the end of that road, it's not a simple answer of a pill. It requires far more creative solutions. It requires more of a truly holistic approach. When we say holistic, meaning you have to factor in psychology and motivation and persuasion and all these other skills that maybe physicians of all disciplines don't have, haven't acquired those kind of skills, or don't know how to even what that would even look like. You know what I mean? And so for us, it's exactly what Andrew said, but also the fact that don't be satisfied with just scratching a little bit deeper. What we're trying to do is truly get to the root of the issue. And the root of the issue typically isn't just in some lab. Labs are important. We're not saying you shouldn't run labs. We're not saying supplements aren't important, but we're saying the approach has to look more complete than that, and one of our simple litmus test questions that we provide functional medicine providers, is this where you're going, Andrew?
100%. Yeah.
Go for it. I'll let you take it away.
I think, because I think most docs would agree with what we're saying. And when we have these conversations with other providers, functional medicine is like, yeah, that totally makes sense. So how do you know if you have an allopathic functional medicine practice and approach? And the litmus test is, if you were to take away the supplements or even take away the labs, would you be able to help patients get healthy without those tools? If the answer is,
or what do you have left with your program?
Exactly.
What else do you,
right.
And most are like sitting there scratching their heads like, well, yeah, I've got a PDF that tells them that they should exercise and meditate and do some yoga. That's, it's a really glossy, cool PDF. There we go. That's what we've got. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot there.
So essentially, I love the idea of the multi-level symptom management, because it's not one thing, and it's not symptoms, it's systems. And we curdle the fact, root cause resolution, but you, Chad, gave a great example. Leaky gut is not root cause resolution. What causes the leaky gut is everybody wants to do 85 different lab tests. Now, we know that many practitioners don't do the right lab test or enough lab testing. Some of the arguments have been that the functional medicine practitioner does too much. And lastly, well, not really lastly, you made a really good point that if I take away one of your tools, you're clinging to the tool. You need the whole toolbox to really get to it. And lastly, a real hidden gem is the environment. People don't know that our environment is a problem. So why are we sicker? I mean, we could go from COVID to obesity here and there. And obviously the diet is a major problem. Standard American diet, sad. But the environmental triggers leading us down that slippery, deleterious path. But what I like what you guys have done is, one, there's a concept that I want you to attack really, is upstream and downstream. And then let's lead that into simplifying functional medicine for the practitioner, because here you have to have this PhD from Harvard and you want to start tomorrow doing something. I mean, you're in 4th grade because you haven't done it yet. Vitamin D is sort of new to you, and that's okay because we all started somewhere. So why don't we cover the idea about upstream thinking, and then let's go into how and why you'd want to simplify functional medicine.
I want to kick this off as just an example. And this is an example we use for a lot of our docs and providers, in that I think there's a problem in functional medicine where a lot of doctors get afraid to enter into functional medicine because they feel inadequate about their understanding of biochemistry, their understanding of labs, their understanding of supplements. And that's a barrier that keeps really smart and effective people at getting into functional medicine, where it's like, I don't know if I can understand all these things. But here's the reality. The greatest functional medicine practitioner I've ever known is still alive today. He's almost 99 years old. His name is Gordon. He grew up on a farm in Iowa. And the funny thing about Gordon is he has a high school education, never went to college, doesn't have any fancy degrees. He's 99 years old, doesn't have any really chronic health issues. he actually he did take he was convinced to get the COVID vaccine. That almost killed him. That's like the first thing that almost killed the guy. He's a World War II veteran. Flew one of the most dangerous routes in Asia, flying planes through these miserable conditions. Like nothing can kill the man. And he's a brilliant functional medicine practitioner. But the funny thing about Gordon is he doesn't even know that he's a functional medicine practitioner. So here's the cool thing about Gordon is growing up on a farm in Iowa, he didn't have running water. He didn't have electricity. His family grew all the food that they ate or raised the animals that they ate for food. Had barely no money. The only things that they ever had to buy were things like sugar or things that they couldn't grow or raise on their own. But he grew up in this environment where he woke up when the sun came up. He worked pretty physical all day working, and then he farmed with a horse and plow, not with like John Deere tractors and things like that. So he was really physical. Grew up. I asked him about like how did you manage pests and weeds and things in your farm. And he's like, well, we didn't have pesticides or things like that, so we just would do crop rotation. And so we would grow different kinds of fruits and vegetables and things like that on our farm. And that's so we didn't have anything. We weren't exposed to those things. We didn't have those even as options. When they needed something, if something happened, they were a very close-knit community in Iowa. So they were always with other people. They had a really strong sense of community, a really strong sense of family. Spent a lot of time. If you've ever farmed manually, you have a lot of time to think and process things. It's not like a fast-paced life now where we're bombarded with all these external factors. And so he grew up. So Gordon grew up this way, and no, surprise, surprise, doesn't have chronic health issues at 99 years old, still alive. We're about to go celebrate his birthday coming up. And so these are the things that we consider fundamental medicine. If you look at his lifestyle, look at his environment, that's what we consider, like if you think of like upstream thinking, it's about as upstream thinking as you can get, is kind of reverting back to like the way our bodies are designed to function in the proper environment. Now, I'm not saying that we should all become homesteaders and move to Iowa and live like this, but I think there's wisdom there for a lot of patients and a lot of practitioners in modeling these types of environments and approaches and thought processes that are really what helps keep people healthy long-term.
Yeah, and I would add to that as well that in terms of this idea of upstream thinking, a lot of what has shaped our mindset with regard to our program and what we teach our docs is not what conventional functional medicine practitioners would typically think of in terms of the types of books and resources you would learn. Most would think things like nutrition and biochemistry. We're saying those things are important. We're not saying those aren't important. But what has shifted or what has influenced our thinking is far more, you could even call it under the umbrella of like behavioral economics, right? What makes people think the way they think? What makes people do the things that they do, right? And so what's influenced a lot of our thinking are various books on habit formation. A big one that's influenced a lot of our thinking is a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits, or Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit. Another big one that has really influenced a lot of our thinking is a book by Dr. Anna Lemke called Dopamine Nation. And she makes a very compelling case in terms of upstream thinking that really most of the health issues and or societal issues collectively for that matter is a simple matter of an imbalance that we have. If you look at like the pleasure pain scale of life, right, that we have skewed that scale too far to the form of pleasure, right? We have shifted collectively as a society and individually our environment such that we are constantly seeking, whether we realize it or not, these ongoing dopamine hits, right? That these devices here are basically designed to be these digital dopamine enhancers or droppers, right? And so much of our environment, exactly what Andrew said, is designed to steer us away from the very things that would be so highly beneficial for us, for a fear of or a desire to avoid any perceived potential pain, right? So we don't experience hard work like we probably ought to. We don't experience extremes in temperature, cold or hot, like we probably ought to. We're in these temperature-controlled environments. We sleep pretty much as long as we want to, oftentimes too much. We're too sedentary when we should be moving, and we're not moving enough when we and we're not still enough when we should be still. So a lot of these different things. So when we say upstream thinking, again, we're trying to get further back to, again, a lot of these just simple fundamentals. And again, that's why we've coined that idea, that concept of fundamental medicine as opposed to just functional medicine.
Great stuff. So I'm getting texts and DMs. They're not showing up on the screen. So let me hit you with a question.
Cool.
I'm a chiropractor. I want to start using nutrition in my office. Where do I start? How do I start? And I have a whole list of questions like that. You'd be shocked. So let's go ahead with the chiropractor, and then you can, if you want, sling it to
Is this shameless plug time, Dr. Wells and Dr. Rob?
No,
I can tell you how not to do it in my humble opinion. When I was in practice and seeing lots of patients, I had the great idea of doing one-on-one nutrition consultations with patients, where I would sit down with them and I would block off half an hour of time, and it usually take an hour of time, and I'd just pour all this great information on patients. Like, here's what you should eat, here's what you should avoid, here's the dirty dozen list on produce that you should buy organic. All these, like, really, at the end of these consultations, the patient like, yeah, wow, this is amazing. What I found was that 10% of those patients would actually like engage and actually do what I was recommending. 10% would be like, this sounds really hard. I don't think I'm going to do that. Thanks for your time though. And then like 80% of our patients would do some things, but not a whole lot.
Right.
And what we found was, it's like, if you were to tell a patient, and this is maybe a little bit too philosophical, but I think it's applicable. If you were to tell a patient, well, eat more vegetables, eat more like natural meat, like chicken and the things that aren't processed, cut out sugar and processed foods, and go do that. The patient's like, well, how long do I have to do that for? Well, you do it forever, for the rest of your life. And it's like, whoa, like, you want me to change my diet for the rest of my life? No, thanks. That sounds painful. Like Chad was talking about, it's this imbalance of this pain-pleasure balance. And so what we found was that if there are some sort of Trojan horses that we use to kind of ethically trick people to making these healthy changes without them even realizing that they're doing it. And maybe, Chad, you want to talk about kind of how we've systematized that?
Yeah, much of our thinking with this regard has been influenced, again, by this concept. The term I heard coined by Charles Duhigg in his book, Power of Habit. He talks about this idea of keystone habits. And this idea of keystone habits is that a keystone habit is a habit that when you engage in it, it literally starts to bleed over into all aspects and areas of your life. So like you could think about it like the first domino in a row of dominoes. What's the first domino that's going to have the greatest impact? And so going back to that original question, how do we start? I would argue a couple things. Number one, the whole idea of doctor being teacher, right? That it's Latin for the word teacher. The most impactful teachers are the ones that teach and or lead by example, right? It's really difficult for, and I'm not trying to be clever or cute with this answer. So we'll kind of talk somewhat philosophical, like Andrew said, and then we'll get somewhat more nitty gritty. But it's really hard for a patient who's wanting to get healthy to take advice from their obese doctor who's smoking. That's a real challenge, right? And so, and I know that's an extreme, but the whole idea, exactly what Andrew's saying, is one of the big things that we put as a keystone habit in our program is the importance of morning and evening routine. And we weave into that morning routine and that evening routine essentially all of the fundamentals. And we'll get to more of the specifics on that. But in essence, just in general, those fundamentals are movement or exercise, mindset, meditation, breath work, et cetera, nutrition, and really, some of those types of practices that will really give you the biggest kind of bang for your buck. And we stack those morning and then evening, such that the conversation that we have with patients, like Andrew said, is which way am I pointing? I'm pointing this way, right? Like Andrew said, is if we were to tell a patient, okay, Sally, you want help with your chronic health issues. Here's what we got to do. First, we're going to do a total detox. What that's going to consist of is us going through your diet and making sure we do a complete elimination of all potential offenders. So that's step one. step 2, we're going to do a whole supplement overhaul with you. So we're going to be having you take this stack of 20 bottles of supplement. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have you start this exercise. I mean, already she's lost. She's like, oh man, this is way too overwhelming, right? So instead, the framework of the conversation now is, hey, Sally, all we're going to ask you to do is start a new morning and evening routine. And with that said, it's just 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. Can you do that? Can you just carve out an extra, we'll show you how to shave off or carve out 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. Can you do that? That's far less overwhelming. In fact, that's very doable. Yeah, I can do that. I can do a morning and evening routine. And we're just going to ask you to do it for the next 30 days. We're not even asking you to do it indefinitely. Just do it for the next 30 days. Let's see what happens. And again, what starts to happen is, again, that power of psychology and motivation comes into play. You start to see, they start, developing, because if you look at the psychology again, what all of the best psychologists have found is that habits are shaped by identity, and identity reinforces habits, right? It's this kind of infinite feedback loop, right? The more you do certain things, the more it shapes your identity, right? And the more your identity becomes shaped or solidified as something, the more that's going to reinforce those habits, right? And so what we're trying to do is help these people change, in essence, their identity. So getting back to that original, how do you get started in functional medicine? To that end as well, I would tell Andrew, or tell that doc, what you don't need is the PhD, like you said, Dr. Rob, because so often what happens is docs, they sit on the sidelines and wait. And there's a really good story. I remember I heard this from Russell Brunson, who heard it from Tony Robbins, and maybe Tony Robbins tells everybody this story, but Tony Robbins was learning NLP from some practitioner guy, neuro-linguistic programming, which is a type of psychological framework that can help people make changes, really powerful changes really quickly. And he was at this training and he was learning these techniques, and he's like, holy cow, these are life-changing for people. He's like, we need to go across the street and just start helping people. And they're like, whoa, slow down there, buddy. You're not certified yet. And he's like, what do you mean I'm not certified yet? He's like, I learned something that works, so let's go use it. Let's go help somebody. And that was his big thing. He ruffled a lot of feathers that week because he was very unconventional in that he didn't follow the framework and the rules, And so, and I recognize and understand that there are certain, rules, if you will, that need to be adhered to and followed, especially in terms of scope of practice and those types of things. But there are so many different fundamentals that you can start incorporating immediately. And what we're suggesting, what I'm saying is here, don't sideline your ability to help patients by waiting because you have to have some 4-year degree or 5-year degree or postgraduate diplomat status or something like that. There are so many interventions that can be utilized that we're talking about right now that could make a massive impact and difference for good in your patient's life. Anything else that you wanted to add to that, Dr. Wells?
Yeah, I think hopefully that answers your question. And if you wanted to, if it was just like a nutrition program, if just very simply do something and see what works and what doesn't work. So for example, what I would do if you just want to start with like no cost, no risk at all, is set up a 30-day nutrition challenge with your patients, make it a group activity, host a workshop in your office and say, we're going to do a 30-day nutrition challenge. It's going to be $99 to sign up. You always want them to have some skin in the game. And if you don't have any resources, just pick up a nutrition book from Barnes & Noble, like a bestseller. You'll find awesome resources. Like there's endless free and very low cost resources. Pick up one of Dr. Silverman's books as a guide if you want to use that. And just take your patients and yourself through a 30-day challenge and just see what your experience is, what you learn from it and what didn't work. And that's a really very easy way to start.
You do it Frank Abagnale style is what you do, right? You know the story of Frank Abagnale? He was the guy from Catch Me If You Can. He taught a full entire year at Brigham Young University. He was teaching a sociology class, and they asked him, what the heck did you do? Like, you're not a sociology professor. He said, no, I just always read one chapter ahead of the students. And so exactly what Andrew said, get Rob Silverman's book and just make sure you're a chapter ahead of your patients, right? So just stay one chapter ahead.
So they're blowing up my phone. It's very funny. They're looking, guy says, all right, I admit that I'm that guy, and I guess he means the guy that you were talking about, you know, is a little heavy set, got a coffee stain on his shirt, smoking a cigarette, all that kind of stuff. My MD was like that when I grew up in the 70s too. My mom loved him. He's a great diagnostician, totally different. I was actually watching a flick yesterday, and in the flick is funny. The doctor was working on the guy in an open area, open wound. It was, you know, Western, smoking a cigarette. Everybody's breathing, no masks. It was hysterical. But anyway, he says, give me 3 concise things that I can do for myself. So now you're talking to the practitioner so they can be healthier tomorrow. And that can translate into what they share and elucidate to the patients.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. 3 things, man.
I can spot you one. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah, go for it.
Cut down on added sugars, everybody. Please. 67% of 60% of everybody's adult caloric intake is from sugar and ultra processed food. So let's decrease that. I'll spot you that one.
Can I jump in, Andrew? Can I do number 2 here?
Yeah.
Kind of along those same lines with Dr. Silverman. Andrew and I, we were at a health mastermind group. We're part of a high-level health mastermind group, and we were at this. We were at the closing ceremonies, if you will. Andrew knows this story, and what it was this kind of round table. Okay, everybody share your greatest biohack. Like, what's the coolest piece of technology, the coolest resource you can share with the group? And this one doc who's very successful, he's got a massive following. He said, I'm going to share with you the most incredible technology that I have found that reverses type 2 diabetes, that helps regulate not only blood sugar, but inflammation throughout the entire body. I've seen it reverse just about every type of chronic illness you could imagine. It's cured plantar fasciitis. It's cured back pain. It's helped with cognitive decline. It has changed, various biomarkers throughout the body. And everybody's like, okay, what is this tool? What is this? And he says, you ready for it? And everybody's like, yeah. And he says, fasting. And everybody's like, oh man. And so, we
all had our phones out ready to like buy this thing that he was talking about.
What's
like,
the thing?
what is it? Is it a laser? What is it?
And so the thing is this, we don't need to go into the complexities because everybody's going to have a take on it. But all I would simply say, 2 simple rules, right? Close down your window of eating earlier in the day. Don't eat late into the evening. So close it down 6 or 7 at the latest. And then don't resume it until, say, at the very earliest, 10 or 11, if you want to try this idea of intermittent fasting. And then maybe once a month, once every quarter, do an extended fast with water and or Himalayan salt, right? So you don't deplete your minerals and all that fun stuff, but do that for 24 to 48 hours. That alone could be a very, very profound and powerful tool in and of itself that could really make a massive difference for your health. That would be another one. And then Dr. Wells, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I'll say those are 2 really great points. Third one, it's very practical, is ruthlessly eliminate for 1 month any and all contact from mass media, Facebook, social media. Get rid of it. And I would even say, if you want to challenge yourself, the doc mentioned that he watched a flick yesterday. That's cool. See if you can go for 1 month without movies, television, external input. Be alone with your thoughts and watch and slow. It'll force you to slow down, which is cool. But just watch what happens when you get rid of that stuff for 1 month.
Can I add to that too? Can I add to that? Be deliberate about getting outdoor with that time. So what are you going to do with all that time, right? Getting outside. You'd be surprised as to what would happen simply. We talk about one of the root causes behind a lot of these health issues are what we call rhythm imbalances or kind of dysfunction with your HPA axis, right? Well, how do you fix it? You got to have supplements. Supplements help, and that's a big part of it. But even something as simple as, okay, getting up in the morning and getting the direct sunlight exposure to your eyes, to your skin, to your body, right? So first thing in the morning, be up for the sunrise and have that literally sit on your skin and be a part of that. And then at night, go out and be out moving at night. Just gently take a nice little walk or stroll in the evening. And really what you're essentially doing is you're kind of setting your circadian rhythm, your HPA axis, you're setting it to that normal 24-hour cycle or that sun up, sundown cycle. That alone, so along with what Dr. Wells was saying, eliminate those things, but then spend your time outside. That in and of itself is going to be such profound medicine for you, you know?
That's part of the outcome is when you eliminate those things, all of a sudden you're left with immediately left with, what the heck am I going to do now? And then you have to start looking for these analog things to start doing. I mean, like Chad mentioned, going outside, that could be reading a book. That could be one activity we have our patients do is really simple journaling, write down something on a piece of paper in a journal. So it kind of leaves you back in the 1980s and how do I entertain myself? Like my parents said, I'm bored. And I told my parents, I'm bored.
I'm bored.
1986, Andrew Wells. And they would tell me, well, go figure something out. That's the solution. And that was a great solution. I wasn't allowed inside the house. I had to go play with sticks and rocks and beat up with my, play with my friends and stuff like that.
Drink from the hose.
Yeah, drink with those. Great functional medicine from my parents there.
So for you guys, what most people don't realize is people who choose what we do so because something changed in our life or something changed with a family member. So it's very intrinsic. It's just not a thing. It wasn't that you didn't make medical school or, hey, today, I'm working, doing this and I'm going to go to chiropractic school or get into functional medicine. There was a driving incident or force. So I'm curious, Chad, which drove you to want to do this?
Great question. I would have to say, without hesitation, my wife has been very much a big motivating force for me. My wife, for those who know me and know a little bit about my story, my wife has dealt with chronic health issues for years, pretty much from day one of our being married. We dealt with as a couple early on infertility. All three of our beautiful children are adopted, which that in and of itself has just been an incredible blessing in disguise. It's been such a neat experience for us. But we have three beautiful, wonderful kids. In fact, today was the first day of school for them. My son just started his junior year. Sam, he's 16. My daughter, Noelle, just started her freshman year. And then my youngest, Ruby, is in 7th grade. So my wife, we dealt with infertility. She dealt with thyroid cancer, had her thyroid removed, and I'll just say kind of my story in this is that the entire time, I had finished chiropractic college and had no clue about functional medicine, no clue. I had heard the term being tossed around, and I saw some students going to these different seminars, and they were throwing around names like Dr. Datis Karazian and that. And so I knew a little bit about that, but I just kind of put that out onto the shelf just because I'm that's not what I'm doing. I'm a chiropractor. I'm dealing with musculoskeletal issues. And the entire time my wife is dealing with these problems, I'm of the attitude and mindset, let's just trust the experts. They know what they're doing, and meanwhile she was bouncing around from, different specialist to different specialist. And after literally about a decade of dealing with this and seeing this pattern start to emerge, that all they were doing was just chasing all of these different symptoms and not helping her, I became very frustrated, to say the least. And so one day, literally it was out of desperation. I was so discouraged and depressed because my wife had been struggling, was not getting any answers. I was online and I was just searching for whatever I could find. And I came across a functional medicine training program. This was Dr. Dan Kalish's program. And so I appreciate him. He's a great guy and he was a great mentor to me. He listed off kind of bullet point by bullet point. Literally, it was like my wife's symptomology. We're going to teach you how to solve this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem, this. And I'm like, so basically what you're telling me is you're going to help me learn how to fix my wife's issues. And so this was at a time when my practice was struggling early on. I didn't have any money, but I'm like, I've got a credit card. I'll at this point, it's going to be better learning this than continuing to waste money with various experts that weren't really helping. And so I went through his program, started applying some of the things that I was learning with her. And the good thing there is that it wasn't like a regular patient interaction because I wasn't having to deal with constraints of note-taking and or insurance and or just time constraints. This was my wife. And so we used some of the testing and then protocols and made a huge difference for her. And I was like, this is incredible. This was cool. And then so then from there it was starting to kind of adopt and learn and implement these things into practice. What I came to find was it was a different story putting it into practice. Both Andrew and I, we joke with each other and others that we are both functional medicine flunkies, and that when we went to implement into into our practice, it was a completely different model, and it was a whole different beast. And so I'm very transparent about it. I was very unsuccessful at the beginning of trying to plug functional medicine. And the reason being is because it was just so cumbersome. And there was, exactly what we're talking about here. There's just so many different variables and so many different complexities associated with it. And so, anyways, that's what led to, but at the heart of what I do, so much of what I do is I have a very high level of empathy for those who are struggling with chronic health issues. Because I've seen it firsthand in my own life with my wife and other friends and family members over the years who have dealt with health issues. So I'm very sensitive of that. I'm very, I have a real soft spot in my heart for people who struggle with these issues. And that's what, long story short, what really motivates and drives me, with what we're doing.
Andrew?
I have a kind of a goofy story. I discovered functional medicine when I was 9. My parents had a really dysfunctional relationship, and it caused a lot of problems. And I had no resources when I was a kid that I thought. And so my way to stay out of a chaotic house was just to be outside. And so one day I remember I was just feeling really anxious and I felt really bad. I had no idea what to do. I was by myself. So it was like a weird flash of lightning. I just thought, okay, I'm just going to start running. So I started running around the block. And I was like an hour in, and the neighbor called my mom, and she goes, "Is Andrew being punished or something? He's been running for the last hour, and like, what's wrong with him? Is he okay? Like, what's going on?" And she's like, "I didn't even know he was running." So I remember I'd run. I can't remember the mileage. I think it was close to 5 miles, and I remembered very distinctly finishing up this run. It was like late summer, same time now. I remember laying in the grass in my front yard, looking up at the sky and like the sun coming through the clouds. And I felt like $1,000,000. All like the stress and anxiety that was like building up in my little 9-year-old body was gone. And I didn't realize it. I couldn't articulate it, but I realized I felt for the first time that I had control over my feelings, control over my emotions. I had a tool that I could use to kind of deal with these problems with my family. And so that was, Chad mentioned like these keystone habits. And so because running felt good to me, I just kept doing it. And this was right in like the 90s, 80s and 90s, when like 5Ks and 10Ks became really popular. And so my dad used to take me to 5 and 10K races. So my dad was 6'4", like 300 pounds, was a smoker, had this old school like perm hairdo. He's like, did not look like a 5K, 10K runner, but he would take me to these races because he knew I liked it and enjoyed it. And because I was around these other people who were runners and into like fitness and health, I was kind of an anomaly in my family, that I picked up all these really, like I saw how other people were living. I saw how other people were coping with their stuff in life, and that it was working. It worked for me. And I forgot about this. So that was like the keystone habit. Like I adopted all these habits that kind of went with running, that I would consider fundamental things, like getting outside, like running when it was freezing cold, running when it was really hot, being out in sunlight, being out in darkness and running. And that made me feel really good. Like Chad mentioned, now fast forward 30 years after that, trying to learn functional medicine, what I would call the allopathic way, just made no sense to me. And it kind of made me feel stupid. Like, how come I don't understand these things? And I'm like, wait a minute. I knew what worked when I was 9 years old, worked for me, it worked for other people. Why don't I just start doing those things and then incorporate some streamlined testing and supplementation? And like, that was that approach made sense to me. And I realized, well, it worked for me, and it also worked for thousands of our patients. And so from a lot of failure and a lot of like self-experimentation, we, and with massive help from Chad, we systemized it. So it's like, well, not everyone wants to be a runner, and that's cool. We don't advocate for that. But we figured out a way to actually systemize what we knew worked for patients. And here we are today, helping lots of patients and lots of doctors help do the same thing, systemize what we know works.
And Andrew has said that if his story sounds a bit like Forrest Gump, you're not alone, because that's when he told me that story originally. I was like, this is sounding an awful lot like Forrest Gump sitting on the porch one day, just decides to run and never stops running.
That was 100% true. That's exactly how it happened. And I'm not joking. My dad was in the shrimp business, if you remember.
That's right. That's
a
right.
very true
That's
story.
funny. And you didn't get to meet John Lennon, though. So Forrest Gump has something on you.
That's a bummer. Yeah.
So you guys created something called Simplified Functional Medicine. In a nutshell, what is it? How can people get in touch with you? Websites, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. Thanks for the plug. So what we did was we systematized functional medicine in a very streamlined way. And so all the things that we're talking about, we help doctors create systems and solutions to be able to help more patients in their practice with functional medicine without interrupting what is already working in their practice or kind of disrupting their practice with lots of cumbersome and often unneeded variables and tests and supplements that you can easily dive down the rabbit hole on. So Chad and I are very much systems people. We like to help doctors help more people. So if you want to, that's what simplified functional medicine is. And basically at the core, we teach streamlined clinical protocols. We teach patient enrollment skills. So what to do for a patient on day one, what to do on day two, how to enroll a patient, how to take care of them through a care plan. And then lastly, we're also a marketing and practice management business. And so we help doctors grow and scale their practice with functional medicine in a very scalable way. So we really created, again, out of failure and frustration, we created a functional medicine program that we thought from the ground up, from scratch, what would be a perfect functional medicine program. We created it. And now we have docs all over the country using it. So if you're interested in it or want to learn more about it, we have a really, if you go to our website, simplifiedfunctionalmedicine.com, we have a training, an on-demand training. You can watch it. It's about an hour long, and it spells out exactly what simplified functional medicine is, exactly what it isn't. And then you can figure out if that's, a system that makes sense for you.
And I would add to that two things. Number one, what Andrew described is literally as plug and play as you can possibly get. This means that you, the doc, when you come in, you can expedite and shave off a tremendous amount of time. This is not going to be a 6-month-long, 12-month-long journey. Like we had said, we want this to be something where docs can implement immediately and start helping their patients. And so we've had doctors as little as 2 or 3 days have the know-how to be able to start plugging this in and actually plugging it in and working with patients. And so this is intended to be, you hit the ground running. And so this is as turnkey can possibly be in this realm, exactly what Andrew said. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to create some program. All of the tools and resources you could possibly need have already been developed for you so that we literally just hand it on over to you. I would use the word franchise, but it's not a franchise because I know that comes with some connotations and associations that may not necessarily be as desirable as people would like. But I mean, in terms of all of the wonderful things that you would get from a franchise, in terms of things that have already been done for you, heavy lifting, we've certainly done that. And then the second thing I would say is if you go to simplifiedfunctionalmedicine.com, if you do the on-demand training and choose to have a demo with us where basically we'll pull back the curtain and go over everything, be sure to let us know, obviously, that you saw us on Dr. Rob's show, because we do have a good relationship with Dr. Rob. He's one of our clinical advisors. And so you can rest assured, too, the thing I would say is we make the very transparent claim. We're not the geniuses. We rely on the Dr. Rob Silvermans of the world to assist us and provide more of that, oversight in the sense that we teach something and then we're constantly looking over our shoulder and saying, is that right, Dr. Silverman? Is that good? Did we did we teach the right thing? And he's like, yeah, you guys are good. Okay, all right, we're good. So just know that the protocols, the systems, everything we're teaching from a clinical standpoint has been vetted by some of the very best and brightest, Dr. Rob being one of them. So and I would just echo again what Andrew said. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share this with docs, because we very much, our mission is very, very crystal clear with what we do. And our mission statement is to empower practitioners to empower their patients. And so we feel a strong sense of purpose with what we're doing. We want this to be a mass movement because we feel like there are far more people that aren't getting the help that they need, but can get the help that they need through a better approach.
Well, we have a kumbaya there. Thanks for all the nice things that you said. I appreciate all your time. What I'm trying to do now, because there are people who have gone through the whole podcast, and that's the goal, I'm going to give them one little piece of information, little health bit. That's what they've been asking for. So everybody, if you drink 1 tablespoon of vinegar 30 minutes before a meal, you will decrease your blood glucose level by 35%. So you don't have to change any of your calories. You don't have to change your amounts. You can do it. If you guys are interested in getting a hold of Dr. Wells, Dr. Woolner, we'll give you all the things in the comment section. Guys, it's been my pleasure, docs. Thank you so much for your time. We have to do this again. And that's Dr. Andrew Wells, Dr. Chad Woolner. I'm Dr. Rob Silverman, Proven Health Alternatives.